I focused on individual events, so I didn't do debate per se. But my freshman year in high school, I did an event called Radio News Announcing and did really well.
Podcasting and interviewing is almost being afraid of the silence.
And if you are stuck as to what to write, I told this to my coach once. I said, I don't feel creative right now. I don't feel like I have ideas. And he said, you're not reading enough.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kurkowski. I'm so grateful for you to join me today. So in this episode, I'm joined by Brian K Wright. He's the host of Success Profiles Radio, writing coach, and author of numerous books on success and entrepreneurship, including the #1 selling new release book, Greatest Lessons I Learned from Being an Entrepreneur, Volume 2. So I met Brian not too long ago when he was a guest presenter in a mastermind group, and the way he described his process of writing and podcasting and how he coaches these had such carryover into the strength world. I wanted to have him on the show and dive more into his work and the art of writing. So Brian shared some incredible stories of getting involved in writing and podcasting and how he helps those struggling with ideas unlock that book within them. So a different type of conversation here than many I've had on the podcast, and it was really interesting to dive into this specific topic. All right, thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, please make sure you're subscribed, and it would be so awesome to hear from you in a review. Help spread that message of strength for me. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Now let's get on with the show. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the show. Brian, so nice to see you. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, Michael. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, no, this is going to be great. I got a chance to hear you speak in a mastermind group that I was in. And from the world of your success in podcasting and in writing and really coaching writing, I left there. I was like, I want to dive further into what Brian's doing and really get in. So again, I appreciate you taking the time, and we're going to get into some pretty cool topics here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I'm going to give a brief intro to the listeners for you first. I have Brian Wright here with me. As I said, I got a chance to hear him speak at a mastermind with my group partners recently, and he's the host of Success Profiles Radio. He's also a ghostwriter, a book writing coach, written numerous books, just had his newest book come out, The Greatest Lessons I Learned from Being an Entrepreneur, Volume 2, come out, which shot up to #1 in new releases right at noon on the first day right there. So if you guys are interested in writing, get your pen and paper out here. We're going to go into some cool topics here because this guy knows what he's talking about. So we'll get everything rolling. Brian, to kind of kick this off, I want to get into some of the aspects of writing and podcasting, but I want to hear a little bit more about you first. I believe that you got into kind of speaking competitively, which I believe is probably debate club early on. Was that kind of your first introduction into kind of the whole communication world?
Yeah, exactly. I focused on individual events, so I didn't do debate per se. But my freshman year in high school, I did an event called Radio News Announcing and did really well. So that was a taste of what my current career actually is. Although I didn't know at the time how it would evolve. I just knew that I wanted to do something radio related. And then I ended up doing contest speaking in college as well. And made nationals my senior year. That was fun. And I ended up teaching at a 2-year business college in Nebraska. And that was also fun. I taught public speaking, English composition, and business math. And the common thread is that they're all required courses. And so I felt like I had to make it as fun as possible. And so I think I did.
Okay. What was it about like speaking in the radio that enticed you so much? Was it just the communication? Was it the ability just to kind of deliver content? Kind of what was it that it seemed like it just, hit you right away?
Well, when I did that event in high school, I was a little scared to speak in public because I had a situation in junior high where I bombed it. I basically muffed the punt, if you understand what I'm saying. And I didn't know if I really wanted to do that again. And it took some not coercing, but some heavy convincing from my speech teacher. And she said, you can totally do this. And then she said, there is an event where you're not going to have to face an audience. I said, really? Tell me more.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that was Radio News Announcing. So that's why I picked that. And I got a 1 at state. And I said, I want to do this again. And she said, you can't do that event again. I said, why not? It's because the rules prohibit you from doing an event again the next year if you've already, quote unquote, mastered it. Oh. So now I had to face an audience. Yeah. And that's where my path to actually facing an audience really went. And I have no problem doing that now. But I love doing radio because I get to interview people. I get to learn from what they're doing. And I've been doing it since January 2012. So it's been over 10 and a half years now.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's great. I do it every Monday at 6 Eastern. So I did an episode yesterday devoted entirely to the new book that I launched yesterday, which you previously referenced, The Greatest Lessons I Learned from Being an Entrepreneur, Volume 2. It's the second of 3. And the third one I want to come out before the end of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a fun journey. And I just can't wait to continue sharing, because I mean, I help people write books now, whether I ghostwrite or whether I coach people, because I taught English and I had a book. One of my first book was already out by the time I decided to do this. I figured, well, if I have a book and I've taught, I can totally do this.
Right.
And I just started setting the intention out to the universe. I help people write their books, even though I didn't have a client.
Yeah.
I didn't have a client, but I spoke it out loud often enough that people started to ask me about it. And now I have a business and I'm self-employed and I don't need a job anymore. I mean, I did that for years and it certainly has a place. But it wasn't for me anymore. I wanted my time freedom. It's not just about money freedom. It's about time freedom more than that. Because if I have to run errands, I don't have to wait until 5 o'clock and I don't have to do it on my lunch hour, and I can do it whenever I need to. And I can work when I feel like it. And sometimes I do a lot of my work in the morning. Sometimes I do it in the afternoon. Sometimes I do it in the early evening if I didn't have time to do it. So really the key is for me to figure out, when am I most alert? And what is my task list of things that require the most mental energy? And I pair those up. That's how I'm productive.
I love it. Has that changed over time? Do you change your times of when you're productive, or has that always stayed pretty constant since the start?
I think it's changed because now I prefer to do shows like this in the morning. I prefer to have my client calls in the morning. Yeah. I prefer to have my urgent business in the morning that I need to take care of. That frees me up to be creative in the afternoon and evening.
Yeah. It's interesting with because time management is, a $1 billion business of everything down. But it's funny when you get into entrepreneurship and you realize your whole day is essentially yours, but like that freedom right off the bat can also be a little bit freaky and scary at the same time. So kind of knowing that self-awareness almost has to almost naturally be built and almost put into the fast lane in order to figure out when you are right at the beginning, right? Right.
Just because you have a lot of time doesn't mean you always use it well.
Yes.
And there are a lot of rabbit holes, especially with technology. And you have to really be aware of how you're using your time. There are days where I felt like I got a lot done, but it wasn't the stuff I was intending to get done. It's because I was putting out fires, answering questions, answering inquiries from people who want to work with me, taking care of business.
Yeah. Yeah.
All those things.
All the joys of the job. Yeah. But it is, the pros outweigh the cons, I believe, incredibly from there. So it's so interesting, kind of going back to when you were, on the radio, kind of the no audience speaking to public speaking. I think everybody's had that fright in their life at some point of public. I don't know many people who just jump right on stage and are just ready. Maybe there's a few outliers right there, but it is, it's such a common fear that we have of just speaking out. When you first got into that, was it a really planned out thing? Like, did you plan extra, like during that time, like for that first speech?
Yeah, I did. In fact, it's interesting when you're in competition and you do the same speech over and over and over again, you almost memorize your speech.
Yeah.
And if you have a brain block, you have to stop for a minute, and that can be a little debilitating. It can ruin your confidence a little bit. But you practice often enough that you have your speech down pat.
Yeah.
One of the events I did in college was called Impromptu speaking, where you get a quote and you have 7 minutes to prepare and deliver a speech and be done, start to finish in 7 minutes. So the way I broke it down is I would prep for about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then speak for 5.
Wow. Oh, so you got to really fill the time in for there.
Oh,
That's interesting.
Yeah, because if you're done in 4 minutes, you didn't prepare enough.
That's crazy. Yeah. It's interesting with speaking because I think one of the big things, what I found a lot when I first got into, podcasting and interviewing is almost being afraid of the silence. you know, of like, you don't want that dead air space. Like that's the longest, like 3 seconds when you're giving a speech out there. Yeah. But then I found the ones that I really found that are really so great at public speaking, like they own that silence. It's kind of like you almost build it in to kind of build up the audience. So it really is, it's such an art of speaking. And I think that probably correlates so much into writing as well.
Right. When you plan the pause, it's for effect.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think with writing, you know, you build towards something. And sometimes what I'll do when I write is I will have a 1 sentence short paragraph, 1 sentence as a paragraph all by itself for effect. So it stands out so that you see it, you have to see it.
Ooh, yeah. That's so interesting. I never thought of that before. And it's, you know, it seems like, you know, in my head, when I first got into writing is I thought that there like had to be a specific way to do it. Like you read a book and like you kind of probably like just a brand new comedian that's going up on stage. You kind of mimic the ones that you listen to early on until you kind of find your own voice. But doing something like that of like 1 sentence or just one short paragraph and like as one whole chapter and having that effect.
Yeah, one whole paragraph. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like there is no one way to do it. But is that one of the struggles that seems like people get in when they start working with you in writing? Like they think like it has to be a specific way, or?
I think a lot of people aren't sure what it's supposed to look like at all. So they want my help.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, if I'm coaching people, I will read what you've written, and the editor in me just can't not fix something. So I've got an agreement with one of my current clients where I will, you know, also edit because I like the guy. We're a mastermind together, and I wanted to help and serve him. So I've agreed to edit his book for the same price that I'm coaching, which I don't do that for everyone. In fact, I tell most people, find your own editor. I am here to give you 8 sessions to answer all your questions.
Gotcha. So when people come to you for these sessions and get into the writing process, what's the main struggles that most have? Is it more on the creative side of how to put ideas together, or is it more kind of the framework and grammar? Is it a little combination of both, it seems?
It's more about the ideas. What do I say? Is this appropriate? Or sometimes it's, I'm not sure I have enough to say. So if they own a Facebook group, I will tell them, ask your group this question relating to your topic and see what other people say. That can be content for your book. In fact, I had one client who was doing a book about resiliency and overcoming difficult situations. And her concern was that she wouldn't have enough content all by herself. And then she mentioned that she had 2 Facebook groups. I said, okay, there's your ticket. Ask your group for your favorite overcoming stories. And she had 25 people pitch in their stories, and she got permission from all of them to use their story. A lot of them were sent, and they were all women because they were women's groups. And all of their stories had to do with overcoming divorce or bankruptcy or custody or losing their job or their business failing or the loss of a loved one, like their mom died. These are all big deals. And so they tell their story and how they got through it. And those stories supported the framework of the book that she was writing.
That's interesting. So it seems like a lot of times with ideas, we think that it's in our own head. Like we have to create all of this stuff, or specifically in something like nonfiction like that, it's like there's 1.5 million stories out there. So just kind of looking out to your community, probably first off the bat, is probably going to give you enough content.
Yeah, you read anything by Mark Victor Hansen or Jack Canfield, they're constantly telling other people's stories with their permission, of course.
That's
stories sell. A lot of the content is out of their own head, but they supplement their ideas with other people's stories to validate the ideas that they're talking about.
So is that where, I mean, there's that concept of writer's block that's out there all the time. I think it's one of those terms that I think it's misconstrued in a lot of different ways. So is it more, it seems like people, when they're coming in, they don't know the ideas or so. It's just everything's in their head all at once and they just don't know how to organize it. Is that kind of the first step of figuring that out?
Yeah. In fact, some of my clients have so many ideas in their head. I finally ask them, are you trying to write more than one book at a time? Oh, maybe. So I tell them, if you've got 2 ideas for books in your head, get out a separate notepad for the other book, write down as much as you need to so that you don't ever forget it, and just put it in that parking lot, so to speak, and then come back to your own idea. That way, when you start writing that second book, you've already got ideas written down.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if somebody wants to write a book, they should just be writing like writing a book versus like journaling practice or so? I'm sure there's probably benefits to both. I'd say there's one self-reflection, one you're actually releasing out to other people. Do you find that the ones that succeed a little bit more in writing a book, are they big journalers? Is that not really a factor?
I think the people who write books already do a lot of writing anyway. And if you are stuck as to what to write, I told this to my coach once. I said, I don't feel creative right now. I don't feel like I have ideas. And he said, you're not reading enough. I said, I'm reading my client's work as I'm writing. It's like, that's not the same thing. Those are things that are in your head. Read ideas that come out of other people's heads. Read other people's books. Listen to their audios. But when you get ideas from other people, that will spark something in your own head. So if you feel stuck, maybe you're not reading other people's work enough.
Right. Sometimes get out of your, that's interesting because, I was always an early writer in the morning. Like I would do like my stream of consciousness out journaling. But then when you feel stuck, if you just read another book, just read anything, just get some other words in there. It's almost not even, it seems like the content is that important, but it's more of like just getting the flow of like it.
Sometimes what I told my students when I was teaching English composition, I said, if you are stuck, get out a journal and write down everything that's in your head for 5 minutes. In fact, I have had my students do this in class. Write down everything that you were thinking. Just don't stop writing for 5 minutes, even if it's, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything. And at the end of the 5 minutes, we'll look at this. And if there's anything salvageable, then start with that. If you don't have anything salvageable, do it again.
Yeah. It's funny, Brian, there's such a correlation to strength training in here that I see, because when we get into training, a lot of work I've talked with people about is intuitive training. And they're like, well, what do I do today? Like, what do I do? It's like, well, we have a framework, but you not know which to take. Do I do an easy day? Do I do a light day? I'm not sure how I feel. And it's like, well, if you just do the warm up of just start doing some things like just a push motion, a pull motion, something's going to come out of that. You're going to know whether you feel like doing this or you feel like doing that. But it's almost like we can get so in our mind of how we're feeling in the moment, not realizing like, yeah, you can actually probably gain some momentum and something's going to tell you what to do down the line. If you just kind of get into the warm up, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, this is a good day for push-ups, or this is a good day for swings. And then all of a sudden you have a plan. It seems like it's kind of similar to writing in that way as well.
Yeah. In fact, I have sometimes written my books out of order. If I know that I'm planning on discussing an idea later in the book, but I have a brainstorm about it now, I will just open up a separate Word document and write that section and just paste it in where it belongs when I get to that point in the book.
That's interesting. I've heard fiction writers do that as well. George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones man, I believe he said that he knew the Red Wedding in it. Spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen Game of Thrones, but it's a big part. But it's been out for 10 years now. He knew that piece was going to be in there, but I think he wrote it last in that book, which is actually kind of maybe in the first third or kind of in the middle of it. So kind of when you get that inspiration, just go with that at the moment. You can always piece it together later, it seems.
Yeah. I usually write my introductions last because I know what I'm setting up, because the rest of the book is already done.
Do you write your titles last too, or do you usually have the title down?
I usually have the title down because when I do collaborative books like this one, I say this is the theme. So I already have a title picked.
Gotcha.
And that helps my collaborative writers know what to write about too. Because if I didn't have a title, they would send me whatever was in their head and it may not always fit. So I had to have a title and a theme very clearly defined for my contributing authors.
Gotcha. Okay. So once somebody is in writing, now they've got the idea down and then they're starting to get into it. It's starting to formulate into something. What are kind of the next, seems like it's struggles that come along the way that you see mostly with people? Yeah.
Am I done yet?
Yeah.
Have I said enough? Have I said too much? Will anyone read this? Is this even interesting? Yeah. those are the things that come up. And that comes from our own self-limiting beliefs. I think we just have to get out of our heads. Sometimes if you feel comfortable doing this, have a couple people, be your beta readers. Just ask them to read it and give their honest feedback. And of course, you'll give them a free copy of your book when you're done for going through the trouble of doing that. Right. So that might help, beta readers, a focus group or whatever. I think sometimes too, if there are certain sections that you're concerned about, ask someone to read that or tell people what you've done and just ask them for their honest feedback. The value of having a coach is, for me, I get to read what you're doing and I can suggest, how about elaborating on this a little bit more? Or I think there's a chapter missing about this. Because I'm thinking as someone who maybe doesn't know your topic as well as you do, but I want to know more. So I'm thinking about what piece is missing so that I feel better informed.
Right. That's probably everybody in some way can struggle with that, right? We think that everybody is inside our head and they know what we know. And at the same time, probably we get so deep in our own forest, we can't see the trees around what's going on. So it's something that sounds really good. All of a sudden you listen to it and somebody's like, I don't know what you're saying here. And it's probably like a little bit.
My big object lesson with that particular point, I had mentioned earlier that business math was one of the classes that I taught. Math comes very easily to me. I can do math in my head. And so when I'm explaining a problem to my students and I'm writing it down, I had one student raise their hand and say, how'd you get from here to here? And I said, oh, I did that part in my head. I'm sorry. I didn't write that down. I didn't write that down. Okay, here's the step I didn't tell you. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it's tough. I'm sure it's tough. And especially when you're writing a book, it's like, you can't go back and explain it to somebody. They might have your book down the line. You're not right there explaining what it is to them. So I could see, everybody probably has that doubt of whether it's interesting or not, because we're in our own head, from there. Do you find that do people think that they need to get everything done like perfectly the first time through and not kind of let everything come out first?
I think sometimes people censor themselves while they're writing. Now, if I see typos, of course, I'll go back and fix it, but that doesn't mean I caught all my mistakes the first time around. But I think you just need to just say what's on your heart. One strategy that I tell people to do is just to turn on a recorder and just talk. Just talk, get it transcribed, and then have an editor fix that up. Sometimes that helps. And just say what you're going to say without censoring yourself. Now, you may need to, censor or edit first. I didn't mean to say this part, or I was just spitballing over here. Take that out.
Right.
Yeah. But just speak onto a recording, grab Zoom, whatever you use to record, and get it transcribed and just look at it and see. It's basically that's an advanced version of the free writing exercise that I talked about earlier. Just write whatever's in your head. Turn on a recorder and just speak whatever's on your heart and go back and listen to it. Even if you hate listening to your own voice, but go back and listen to it or get it transcribed, rev.com, 10 cents a second or a minute, very cheap. And you can do that, or have your assistant, transcribe what you just did. It shouldn't take very long if they're good at it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it seems like it comes always back to people think that there's only one way to do it, right? It's like if you go, I'm a friend of mine, Dave Whitley, who wrote his book, Superhuman You, I believe did it all through transcription. Like he just spoke it out and then went back and just did it for grammar. And it's a beautiful book. It's a phenomenal book. And it's a lot of times like anything, we see a finished product of coming out and we probably put our own thoughts of how it was done. This person was at their typewriter hitting away, drinking their latte and stuff like that. It's like, no, they could have been walking around and just, speaking it there. So I think maybe sometimes we get in our own minds and our own heads of what we think we should be doing rather than what's the best way for us to actually get the information out.
Right.
Yeah. So has podcasting and doing all the interviews, do you feel that was a big help in your writing, or do you think they're both very separate?
That's an interesting question. I think sometimes if I know that I'm going to turn this interview into part of a book, I will ask the kinds of questions that I really, really want answers to. Yeah. But I do kind of think of them separately because I'm just trying to draw out their brilliance when I'm interviewing them and making them, the star. I'm not the star of my show. Right. I'm there every week, but my guest is always the star, always.
Right. That's interesting. And with your podcast, I'm going to segue that a little bit into podcasting because I think that's so interesting of getting into interviewing. I love the aspect of interviewing. I think it's so interesting to hear people's perspectives because you can hear a similar topic in a lot of different ways and people have so much experience. Right. When you get into interviews, do you have specific questions that you want to get into, or do you kind of have more of like a framework, like these are the topics and things that I'd like to discuss? And then as the questions come, kind of let it roll?
I have a list of questions that I want to ask, but that doesn't mean I will ask all of the questions on my list. Mm-hmm. In fact, I usually have probably 35 or 40 questions and I might get to half of those because I don't do a super deep dive on anything. I basically, let's just taste something like a buffet. Mm-hmm. And if there's something that I want them to deeper dive on, then I will ask them to do that. But we cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. And people frequently say, wow, that went fast. We talked about a lot. We did.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting because you never know too what questions might pop up as it goes along. Right. That's always been the question I had with interviewees, and I've talked with people about kind of interviewing process of that is like, how much do you prepare? I'm like, prepare enough to know where it's going to go, but then you never know where it's going to go, and it's almost that kind of gives you the freedom a little bit to be a little bit more in the moment.
Yeah,
it seems
exactly.
Like you do prepare it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a little harder when someone has a new book coming out and it's not out yet. So you have nothing. You have nothing.
So it's just tell me about the book and just let them go.
Yeah, but that makes me look really unprepared. So exactly. When I interviewed Brad Sugars, Action Coach, he founded Action Coach. His most recent book at the time was going to be coming out in about a week or so. I did some online research and I found a bunch of white papers, which turned out to be his chapters. And I think he was really struck by how specific my questions were. And I said, I want you to tell you something, Brad. I had nothing to go on. So I went online and found all your white papers and read them last night. He's like, that's impressive. Wow. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So I was able to give a pretty deep dive on a few topics in his book. And it was really great. It turned out to be a really great show.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but you have to do your research if you're an interviewer. Now, some people can pull off the freewheeling, I'm going to wing it really well. That's not everyone's story.
Right.
I mean, I can tell when I'm talking to someone who's just winging it and it's not done well. It's a snooze fest. It's like, can we just be done?
Right. No doubt. Absolutely.
But stuff like this, I mean, we're just having a great conversation and this is a fun conversation. This is fun.
Yeah. Well, it is. And sometimes you have certain topics you can dive into, but like I said, like you never know where the conversation sometimes going to go, which is fun. But at the same time, I've talked to people about starting podcasts. It's like, no, have a framework of where you want to go with it, mm-hmm. And go from there. So, I mean, you've dove into a lot of different people's, work with Success Profiles Radio on there. So do you like getting some big people on, you've had Kevin Harrington, you've talked with Jack Canfield and stuff mm-hmm. like that. Mm-hmm. How did you approach going and reaching out to them to get on your show?
Kevin Harrington was introduced to me by mm-hmm. someone I met on Facebook.
Okay.
When I connected with this individual, he just, casually mentioned that Kevin Harrington is a partner in one of his businesses. I said, I would love to interview Kevin Harrington someday. I think that would be really great. He said, I'll hook you up with his assistant when we're done. Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, I did not say, hook me up.
Yeah.
I just said, oh,
that'd be cool.
I was expressing a wish. It's like, oh, that would be cool. I'd love to interview him someday. That'd be great. Mm-hmm. And the conversation went well enough that he was willing to do that for me. And the next day we had a day and time locked up. It was awesome. Now, Jack Canfield, I went through his media site or his website, and there's a media link. And so you have to basically apply to interview him. Mm-hmm. And the first time I filled out his form, I heard nothing. And I was advised a couple of weeks later, try again. So I did. Mm-hmm. And his team got back to me the next day and we booked that. And it's really, really interesting how that happened too, because mm-hmm. At the time I interviewed him, I was renting out my home as an Airbnb because I was having some financial difficulties mm-hmm. at the time. So I was renting out my home and sleeping in my car.
Okay.
So I interviewed him from the Chandler, Arizona Public Library.
Wow.
I rented a free conference room and talked to him on my phone in the library.
Wow.
He may or may
That's
not know that, because I did not tell him that.
That's amazing. Wow.
But it's a fun story to be able to tell. It's like, yeah, I interviewed Jack Canfield from the public library. I got a free conference room for an hour.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah,
You do what you have to do. So
exactly. I was going to say,
want to do later.
Yeah, that's just such a lesson of do what you have to do. Like, so often I think we get bombed down into what we think it's supposed to look like, or so. It's like, no, if you can jump on the phone and get the opportunity, then just go with it. You don't know what's going to happen from that, but hey, give it a shot from there.
Yeah. And my producer was recording the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting. Oh, that must have been a lesson that just carried right off the bat. That's one that sticks with you right away.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was really fun.
Oh, that's so, wow. You never know where people come from in their own, lives and what they're going through to get to where they are. That's absolutely fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This was 7 years ago, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. And just go from there. Mm-hmm. So with your writing, your writing process now of putting things together, has it changed over time since you first started writing books to what you do now? Do you have like a specific process that you've done right off the bat, or has it changed over time?
I create an outline. I know what I want my chapters to be about. And then I think of what stories fit into that specific chapter. So if I'm doing a chapter called, and this is a chapter in my most recent book, the greatest lessons I learned from being an entrepreneur, volume 2. One of my chapters is called Be Willing to Be Terrible at First. So then I started thinking about what was I really bad at when I started my business. And the thing I chose to write about was I was really bad at discerning who a good client is and who a client is not. Because I took anybody because I needed the money. And I sacrificed my peace of mind on several occasions.
Yeah.
And it was miserable. I couldn't wait to be done.
Yeah.
Now I say no to that. If I feel like someone's about to micromanage me, I'm not working with you. I'm not available for that.
Right. Do you think there's some merit to that with people who are just getting started? I mean, sometimes you have to take somebody from that, but if you were speaking to a young entrepreneur, somebody reading your book or so, do you think it's best to niche down right away? Or do you think it's best to have more of, sometimes you need to just take everybody to get your feet wet?
If you don't niche down, then you'll get inquiries from people that want you to do stuff that maybe you're not really good at or not really what you want to do. So you need to know who you are, and you need to know who your avatar is. Who is your ideal client? You should know that.
Yeah. Are there specific questions that you have for people who want to work with you and right away, like this person's not ready, or like this person?
I ask them if they have any idea. If they have any idea what their book's going to be about. I ask them what they plan on using the book for. I ask them what call to action do you want to put in your book? That one stumps a lot of people. And I say, well, think about it this way. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you've read the book, that he's wanting to lead you toward buying his cash flow game.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So what you want to have happen next? The book is the beginning of your journey, not the end.
Okay.
Because if you're leveraging your book in your business, you want the book to lead to something else. It's the beginning of your funnel. So are you asking people to hire you to speak? Are you asking people to join your coaching program? Are you simply asking them to join your list? Are you wanting to give them a free something to opt into your list in exchange for their name and email address, at which time you can do whatever you want later, sell them into something else later if you want? Or are you asking people to come to your event, to get a free ticket to your event? T. Harv Eker did that with Secrets of the Millionaire Mind.
It's so funny because all these questions really don't have much to do about the writing process at all. It's all about the vision. Yeah.
It's all about the vision. Why do you want to write a book? If you want to tell your story, that's cute for a while, but so what? Your friends and family will buy it by default, but everyone else will hit the so what button. So what?
Right.
Okay. Well, I think my story can help people. Great. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like. And they might share some tragedy they went through, and they've come out on the other side and built a successful life. Okay, this is interesting, because I tell people, don't delay writing your book, because the longer you wait to write your book, the longer you are depriving someone who needs your brilliance, who needs you right now.
Right. And Vision's so interesting. There's a couple thoughts I wanted to dive in on that, but first I want to ask the people that inquired with coaching, is it still people seem like they have like that surface answer? I want to help people. Like, are people coming to you that do they have an understanding of this, or is it still seems like this is the thing that people haven't thought through?
I think people don't know where to start thinking through it. And so someone like me can help draw that out. Yeah.
This is the thread that I had on this, kind of bringing this into kind of the strength world too, is the whole concept of goal setting. I had a conversation with a good friend the other day about this. It's not that people don't have goals or they don't accomplish goals. It's the same thing. We have no idea actually how to set goal, because we say, oh, I want to do X, Y, Z. I want to lose weight, or I want to gain muscle, or whatever it is. And then we just leave it right there. And then we just start going into action plan, when actually like you didn't think any deeper about, well, why is it there? Like you didn't ask why a few times. If you actually just take that time,
right,
you might realize either one, yeah, this is really what I want to do, or two, no, there's actually a different reason why I want to do this that I'm not putting out. Then there's such a correlation there between writing or, getting into a health and fitness program from there. It's all like taking that little extra time to actually dive in to what you want to do.
You need to know why. Because if you have not identified your strong reason why, you'll quit when you come up against some resistance. And you'll think, oh, this isn't worth it.
It's always,
it is.
It's that same story there. So in 8 sessions that you do with somebody and they come in, so do you kind of do a similar thing, like help them get an outline? Do you figure out like what's the best approach for them, or is it pretty structured down the line?
No, we figure out what their outline is going to be. And then I ask them to write down a list of the stories they plan on telling. And if they need my help, we will figure out which chapter the story fits in best. Because if you've got, let's just say 12 chapters and most of your stories are in only 2 or 3 of them, there's not a lot of balance. And so we figure out, well, can this story go to a different chapter if we had to? So we can balance it out a little bit more.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. This is so fascinating stuff from here. So, Brian, I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been really fascinating about all the process that you have and everything that you're doing. Like I said, I think Success Profiles Radio is such a great show, and I love the work that you're doing. So I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if anyone wants to subscribe, go to Apple Podcasts and look up Success Profiles Radio. I've done, I believe, 482 episodes now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. 482. That's consistency right there. That's beautiful.
And it's usually an hour-long show. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Brian, I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much. Listeners, if you want to go follow Brian, you know where to do so now. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait. Go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.